Hey everyone, welcome to Quad Culture. I'm Kaleb, and today I have Chop It Up Sports Carter Stedman. Carter, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. I'm a lot better now that I'm, talking some ball here. School's out for the day, and just ready to get into some NBA talk.
Oh, I'm all about the NBA right now. I'm a little bitter that they're not giving me the best possible product, but I'm still loving the NBA right now.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because on the episode I just put out, talking about some track and field, I actually just I just said, I'll refuse to put too much effort and energy into the NBA until they decide to put effort and energy into the fans. But
Yeah.
here we are, so I'm excited for it. I'm ready for it.
So today I figured we'd just do a little exercise just because, like you said, there's not as much event stuff going on with the NBA in the sort of regular season. So I thought we'd go through our top five. I know we both kind of talked about it a little bit, but we haven't seen each other's lists. So the top five players that you'd want to start your franchise with today. And so we're going to go on age, play style, popularity, skill, and potential. The reason why age is so important is because we all love LeBron. We'd probably all start our franchise with LeBron today if he was 23, but he's not. He's 40. So, yeah. So let's hop right into it. Do you want to give us your honorable mentions right off the top?
Yeah, do you want all of them, or do we want to go one at a time? How you want to do this?
Give me all of your honorable mentions. I want to hear them all.
Okay. I have Jokic, Giannis, and Paulo Banchero. I think that, Jokic is going to be on any list when you're talking about building a team around him just because of how good he is and how much better he makes the people around him. However, I just think a guy of that size and the way he plays, I'm not sure. I question his longevity. I just don't see a guy who is that big still playing at this high of a level for that long of a time. We all know he's not the most athletic guy. And so I just think, he's at the peak of his powers right now. But if we're talking about building a franchise, I'm not sure how many, years like this, MVP caliber years I'm getting out of Jokic. Giannis, kind of the same thing. I think he's one of the best two-way players in the NBA. But at the same time, I think we're going to start to see a slow, steady decline in his game. Maybe not in the next 2 to 3 years, but I think after that, you're going to start to see a decline just in his freak athleticism. And at the same time, I think you also question yourself, do I want to build a franchise around a guy who struggles to shoot from the three-point line? I mean, we all know how important shooting the three ball is in the NBA, and building a team around a guy who struggles to do that. I have some questions about that. And then finally, I have Paulo Banchero, the youngster for the Magic. I think he goes under the radar just because of the fact that he plays in a small market in Orlando. But he's turned this franchise around. They're a playoff caliber team. I think they can make some noise this year in the playoffs. I don't think that they're going to be at the level of making noise in the Eastern Conference Finals or anything like that. But just the way Paulo plays, you see glimpses of LeBron and glimpses of guys of that nature. Not saying he's going to be the next LeBron, just saying looking at his build, looking at the way he plays, a lot of similarities there. I just think he's young. I think he's an exciting guy to build around. I think he's flexible. You can move him around different places on the court, and for that reason, those are my three guys.
So we do have some crossover. Really just one. I also had Paulo on my list. I think I kind of just when I saw like 30 and up, I was just kind of like, I got to eliminate you. I don't know why, but I respect the Paulo pick. I think he could be a lot better if he wasn't like the sole offensive option on the Magic right now. That team looks horrendous. I mean, it doesn't help that they just lost by 40 to the Cavs. So I also have Tyrese Maxey. I just really like him. He's another guy that's in a really tough situation. He's kind of being forced to just chuck up shots because, Joel Embiid isn't going to do it, and neither is Paul George. So Maxey's kind of been in a tough position. And then I got Evan Mobley. Really good scorer, really good defensive player. I feel like he hasn't quite lived up to his potential, but he's starting to get there. And so, but the big one that's going to sort of launch us into our list. I have Anthony Edwards sitting on the outside in my honorable mention. So I had to
Wow.
do it. Last
Wow, dude.
I want to say I looked at my list before I did this. So I considered what he's been doing last night and over the past couple of games off the list. He's a clear number 6. I want to be clear. He's a clear number 6. But Anthony Edwards sitting on the outside of my list, I'm feeling not as good about it.
Wow, is that like Florida State not making the college football playoff after going undefeated? I feel like that's got to be like the same thing here. I mean, I had Amp, and we'll get into him later, but he was up and down my list, and I think that's kind of a problem and also a benefit of this year's NBA and just the
Mhm.
future of this league is that there's so many young guys going forward that can be the face of franchises, that can be the face of the NBA. And so looking at it, like a lot of people are going to have Ant in their top five, if not in their top three, myself included. But at the same time, you can make arguments that he's not a top five player you'd want to build your franchise around in your case. And I'm really excited to see you back that up here.
Yeah, my Ant take is it's really giving Kendrick Perkins. I'll be completely honest.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, no
but
doubt.
anyway, I'll go first. I'll name my number five, and you can name your number five. So at number five, I went a little. I'm not gonna lie. I think I went a little off the board. I went with Cooper Flag, my boy out of Duke University.
I like that.
Mainly, I like Cooper Flag. I mean, he's a score from anywhere kind of guy. He leads Duke last time I looked in rebounds, assists, and points. So he's doing everything. I mean, he's literally a sweaty player. Like he just goes out there and gives it 100%, uber competitive. Normally, I would be a little bit bullish on taking a college guy, but we saw him go to the Team USA trials and really like play really well against legit NBA talent. So that gives me cause to be excited about Cooper Flag. And plus the fact that when he plays his first NBA game, likely if he comes out of Duke, he's going to be only 18 years old. So that's like 15 years of just really good play if he can stay healthy.
I like that. No, I think, looking at the college guys, it's always hard to tell, but I feel like Cooper's the first guy we've had in the last, 2 to 3 years outside of Wemby. But a guy coming out of the college level where he's like a surefire number one pick. Like, he's going to be good. There's a reason
Yeah.
that you see 6 or 7 teams taking for him. Um,
Wizards, Wizards, baby.
Here we go. But now you got Chris Middleton, though, so watch out. Could be a playoff contender
And
now. You
Marcus
never know.
Smart. Don't forget about Marcus Smart. They're
Exactly.
having fun.
Ooh, all right. At number five, I have Luka. Luka Doncic is coming in at number five for me right now. He's 25 years old, which when I looked it up, I would have thought he was like 27, 28, just simply like, the way he looks, the way he plays. I know he's battling his old team in the Mavericks right now, but for a guy that's 25, he has an NBA Finals appearance under his belt. And then just kind of going off the criteria that we're looking at here. He's playing that slow, methodical kind of type, like old school type of basketball. And I think for a guy like him that can actually age really well as long as he takes care of his body the right way. I know it's been an issue. I know that's why the Mavericks say they traded him, even though I really just can't get behind that idea. But I think as long as he stays in somewhat good shape, I think as long as the conditioning's there, he's going to be a guy that can play for a really long time just because he's not like a John Morant where he's throwing his head off the backboard every time he goes to the rim, plays a smart brand of basketball. I think now that he's in LA, his popularity is going to be bigger than ever. I think being in, part of the biggest market in the NBA, arguably, is going to help him out big time. I know he's kind of sharing the limelight with LeBron right now, but once LeBron retires here in a couple of years, I think, Luka's going to be the face of the league. And I know it's been a big debate whether an international guy can be the face of the NBA. I think that's ridiculous. I think they absolutely can be. And looking at his potential, I mean, we've seen that he can be the best player on an NBA finals level team. And so I think like this is his prime right now. The next 3 to 4 years, you're going to see the best version of Luka Doncic. And I think, as the Lakers, as a big organization, and just as the NBA as a whole, this is what you want in a guy. He can make his teammates better. He can score for himself. He can score at all three levels, which I really like. I think it's really easy. I think it's easier to build around wings than it is to build around like a point guard or a center, just because you have a little bit more flexibility with those guys. I just think Luka's ability to elevate his team makes him one of the stars of the league, and that's why I have him at number five.
Well, and I think like you made a tremendous point. Like his ability to score and his kind of like old school slow style of basketball is going to translate well. That's why the whole like him being out of shape thing just never really made sense. Because like you said, yes, you do want to make sure he takes care of his body decently well, but he's one of those guys that like his game isn't predicated on athleticism. So as he gets older, when guys like Giannis and things like that, their athleticism declines, they might decline. It's just not the reality for him. And I think that's like the really interesting thing with the Luca trade that just makes no sense.
I feel like he could be like a glorified Sean Livingston, like a guy you can just put out on the perimeter. He's going to get to his spots when he's 35, 36 years old. He's going to be able to back you down. He's probably going to weigh 220 pounds doing it, but he's still going to have that
Yeah.
fadeaway with a high arc. He's still going to be able to shoot it at a pretty good clip. And I think, despite the fact that he's probably not the most well-conditioned player in the NBA, I just think that longevity due to the way he plays is something that's really fascinating to look for.
And just I mean, just to kind of cap off, a really smart player, like, is always going to make the right pass, always going to make the right read. Not as smart with his temper, but I mean, I take a guy who really cares about winning over anybody else. So,
Yeah, yeah, no doubt.
all right, I'm gonna drop my number four. Another hot take. I'm leaving a lot of like area at the top, so you're gonna be like, who's he gonna put? I have Wemby I have Wemby at number four.
Wow. Okay.
So here's my case for Wemby at number four. Obviously, generational talent, huge guy, can make lots of plays, a defensive game wrecker, right? But you kind of pointed it out, like, this NBA is more predicated on wings and guards, and we've really only seen one center oriented team like in the last 20 years win a championship, and that was Jokic. And so I think in a lot of ways, I really like Wemby, but he's already starting to miss games. This blood clot thing can be something that could really blow up into something. Not that it will, but I mean, we've seen with big guys, injuries can really affect the course of their career. And so I do worry about Wemby overall. Even though he's this tremendous talent, even though he's always going to be able to cause trouble in the paint, I worry about his ability to be your number one on a championship team. I might be wrong about that. I think he's a freak athlete and I think he's amazing. I got to watch him play live. I have questions.
How big do you think the blood clot thing ends up being? Because I'm a Miami Heat guy, despite the Supersonics hat that I have on right now. Bring him back, by the way. But like as a Heat guy, watching Chris Bosh, just essentially disappear because of a blood clot, like you hate to see that as a fan. He was probably, I'd say he was in his prime when it happened, maybe kind of on the way out. But as we know, these tall guys, they don't necessarily age well. And so, how big of a deal do you think this ends up being for him?
I think it's interesting, right? Because I think you have two examples. You have the Chris Bosh one, which is just terrible. I mean, we got robbed of a full Chris Bosh career. I think we got robbed of seeing Dwayne Wade's twilight, but that's a whole other conversation with how that team could have gone. But also, from what I've read, Brandon Ingram, like about a year ago, had a similar blood clot. And I mean, and he's playing basketball again. And so I think it could go either way. I think I just worry about those injuries with those big guys, like you talked about. There's not a whole lot of sample size of a guy who's 7'5" with his frame and if that's durable or not. And so I'll be really interested to see. Obviously, I'm rooting for him to come back, but the injury thing and just those types of things, and can a center be your best player, a center with the play style of Wemby be your best player? It remains to be seen.
No, I agree with that. I'll give you my number four here. I think some people might have this guy higher, some people might have him completely off their list. I have Jason Tatum. I think
Okay.
Jason Tatum is, and listen, I'm not a big Boston Celtics guy. I totally get the narrative of Jason Tatum's a cornball. He's a wannabe Kobe. He's a wannabe LeBron. I'm here for all of that. Like, I just want to preface this by saying he's absolutely a cornball. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, he's 26 years old. He can score all three levels. And the biggest thing that sticks out to me about Jason Tatum is that he plays games. And I know that seems pretty like general, like, yeah, obviously he plays, but you can't say that about every star in the NBA. You can't say that about Joel Embiid. You can't say that about Kawhi, Paul George. There's a number of guys that struggle with injuries, that struggle to stay on the floor. And the availability of Jason Tatum, along with his ability to play both sides of the basketball. He can be an elite defender. He's lengthy. He can guard, I wouldn't say 1 through 5, but pretty close to it. And I just think as he continues to progress in his career, I'd like to see the 3-point shot get a little bit better. I was looking at his basketball reference page yesterday. I didn't realize he shot over 40% his first 2 years in the NBA. And then
Oh
it
my
just
gosh.
drops to like, it was like 43%, 40% his second year. And then it just kind of drops to like 36, 35. And I know he put on a lot more weight. So maybe it's just, it's a little bit more rigid now. I know he's worked on his jump shot a little bit. But I think being paired with Jaylen Brown, I know a lot of people like to make that debate, but I think Jason Tatum is by far, maybe not by far, but I think he's the best player on the Celtics team. And as we all know, that's a team that is easily capable of winning another NBA Finals. And so I think when you're looking for someone to build a franchise around, how can you not look at a guy who's in his mid 20s? He's a gold medalist. I know he didn't play a lot in the Olympics, but he's going to be a big part of that team in LA in 2028. And at the same time, I know he didn't win the finals MVP, but he was the best player on a championship level team. And so for me, like, what is there not to like about that? Sure, he's going to be an idiot on the microphone after we win a, championship, but I'd much rather have that than a guy who is, not going to contribute to winning and can't play both sides of the ball without, taking a week off of playing. And so for due to his availability, I just really like him.
Yeah, and this works great. I have Jason Tatum at number three. Like, I think he's a tremendous player, and I think you picked it right. Like, he is a mid 20s player who has won a championship and who I think is clearly the best player on that championship team. And I think like the availability, you hammered that home, so important, such a big aspect of his game. But another aspect of his game that I don't think we talk about enough is like he plays well with anybody. Like he can play well with the Jalen Browns of the world, with the Kristaps Porzingis. And the thing is like for him to have an impact on the game, he doesn't have to be the primary scorer. He doesn't have to even be the primary ball handler, even though sometimes he plays point guard and then goes to the other side, plays defense, and plays center on defense. And so he's this really multifaceted Swiss Army man type tool for the Celtics. And I think it gets really pushed under the radar because, yes, I do think he wants to be Kobe, and that's very clear. And everybody from this generation wants to be Kobe. But he really plays more like a really, really good two. Like if Jason Tatum is the two on your championship team, like you're going to win it every single time. And we've seen if he's the one with another really good two, you're also going to win a championship. And so I think for me, that was just the big thing with Tatum was just, like you said, the availability. He's already won a championship and the fact that he's just so multifaceted. Same thing with Cooper Flag, but in the NBA, he leads his team in points, rebounds, and assists, which not an easy feat.
Yeah, yeah, he does it all, and I know he might not have like that one specific thing that makes him the same as like a Luka. As we know, Luka's going to get to his spots. Kyrie had the handles. Wemby's a 7'3" monster who can do it all. Jason Tatum can just do a little bit of everything, and I think that gets underappreciated in a world that gets caught up in a lot of flash. Tatum's not going to be the flashiest guy. I actually think when he tries to fit that narrative of being flashy and trying to do all these 10 dribble moves to get to his shot, I think that's when he's at his worst. And so I think when he plays a simple brand of basketball and he plays the way that we all know he can, that's when he's at his best.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think like Jason Tatum is one of those guys that if he played in the 90s or the 80s, nobody would care. Nobody would care, but he plays in the social media era, so I think that that really brings him down for some reason, but I mean, I agree 100%. I think he's a tremendous player that definitely deserves a lot more respect. All right, you're up. What's your number 3?
All right. My number three here, this is where I put Anthony Edwards in. And my list, I mean, obviously we've talked about the amount of talent that's going to be on this list, but for me specifically, two through five, really interchangeable, even probably number one. But Ant, he's a little bit younger than the guys we've been talking about, Luca and JT. I just think that as, we've seen Ant grow, we've seen the three-point shot get better, we've seen him be able to make a little bit smarter decisions. I think that's something he can work on a little bit, just with his ability to facilitate better. I'd like to see him get his teammates more involved. But in his defense, when you trade for Julius Randle and he's never plays, and your starting center is Rudy Gobert, you're kind of limited in terms of who you're going to kick it out to for an open three.
Mm-hmm.
And so last year, I thought that run to the Western Conference Finals really kind of elevated everyone's thoughts and opinions on Ant. I feel like that was really his coming out party. And then obviously being on the Olympics team, and now they have the documentary coming out. I like he's just becoming a huge fan favorite just because of his confidence, the way he carries himself. We've all seen that clip of him talking to Joel Embiid and Obama, and he's talking to Obama like he's a 15-year-old fan. Like it doesn't matter who he's talking to, he's just gonna, approach him like a normal person, and he's gonna be himself. I think that's what makes Ant so special is that as we see his career continue, you're going to see him, he's going to get better at things. He's going to improve with his three-point shot. We've already seen that this season. He's going to work on his facilitating. I think last year, the biggest flaw we saw in the Western Conference Finals was a lot of times down the stretch, we saw him make mistakes and force things, kind of taking it upon himself. And I think as this Minnesota team hopefully continues to develop and build around him in the backcourt and at the wing positions, I think you're going to see him take that next step as more of a facilitator and a ball handler. But at the same time, I think his potential is that he can be the best player on a championship level team. I think he can easily be, maybe not the next Jason Tatum necessarily, but he can be a guy that can do it all. And if you pair him with a good point guard, maybe if Rob Dillingham, develops or they get another guy in there, you throw in a strong power forward, maybe Julius Randle gets healthy, maybe. That's a big maybe. But I just think he can be the best guy on a championship level team. I think that's his ceiling. And I think year by year we see him get there.
And I mean, I think the other thing, and I think the most important thing for our criteria is maybe debatedly, I don't know if it's much of a debate. It was one of the main things that like just pained me for him to not be on my list was this idea that Ant is probably the best possible prospect for popularity, right? Like we look at Ant and I think I see the next great American superstar, which I think is just so important for his ability and for what we can see next from Anthony Edwards. And so I think that's the big thing for me with Ant.
Yeah, I just think, I think it's hard to develop a big talent in a small market. I think that's what we see with Wemby and Anthony Edwards and some of these other guys, maybe even Shea, is that it's hard to attract people to a place like Minnesota where it's cold all the time, or a place like OKC where maybe they don't have as much cap space and we've seen them build through the draft.
Yeah.
But when you get a guy like Anthony Edwards, a guy who is going to be a national phenomenon, if not a worldwide phenomenon, just with how he plays the game and the way he carries himself, I think you're going to start to see some big time names get themselves in Minnesota here in the near future.
Yeah. And so, going into number two, I'm going to go with my guy, Luca. I put Luca ahead of Ant just because the potential that Luca holds, a lot of those types of things that I still don't think we've seen Luca's ceiling. And as a guy who carried a team taking them to the championship and a Western Conference final, a guy that beat Ant's team, I think is just a really interesting mix. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, Ant had the tougher path to that Western Conference Finals. He had a lot more of the load, which I think made it a lot more difficult for him. But overall, Luca's ability to score, his ability to play make in a league where those are the most important things, is putting the ball in the basket. Like I think, much to both of our chagrin, defense just has been a thing of the past in the NBA. Luca can get a bucket whenever, and he can score 40 anytime he wants, and he can rack up 10 assists. So that's why I put Luca at number two, especially him being in the LA market too. I think is going to help him blow up. And we saw how much the Mavs fans cared about him. So clearly he has a connection with fan bases.
Yeah, you bring up a good point there, just with the ability to, he can score at any time. That was the thing when I was going back and forth with Ant and Luca and Tatum and whoever else really is. I favor the guys that can play defense a little bit more. I think that was one of the biggest issues we saw with Luca last year in the finals was Boston was just hunting him down every possession in the second
Yeah.
half. They're getting Jaylen Brown on him, they're getting Jason Tatum on him, and those guys just ate his lunch money. But at the same time, like he can score at any point in time. And so I think when you look at a guy like that, when you get into the playoffs, even this year, when you have LeBron and Austin Reeves and these guys that can score and have a presence on the defensive end, having a guy in Luca who is just like, oh yeah, like LeBron's having an off night, I guess we'll just give it to Luca. Like that's a pretty good alternate to have when, maybe your main facilitator isn't having his best game.
And when you look at sort of like Luca's presence, do you think this idea, like, obviously they want him in LA? They've stated that, they feel that they're going to be very good. I think Rob Pelinka is very good at very much if he wants you there, you're going to know. Do you think there was some shades of that towards the end of his tenure, even last year in Dallas? Do you think Luca was feeling some of that energy? Maybe not necessarily that he was going to get traded, but that there was just some unhappiness with him and those types of things. I do wonder if that affects his mood and his things like that as much as we think professional athletes should be immune to those sorts of things. I can't imagine. I can imagine that it would affect him.
Yeah, I think it was weird, just because looking at Luca's mannerisms, his whole career in Dallas, really, he was never like the happiest guy ever. You see guys like Giannis, they're laughing after the post game. He's having a good time with his teammates. His kids are in the building. I don't think Luca has any kids, but you just never really saw that like family atmosphere. We all saw the clip last year where I don't know if it was Nico or another GM like takes the beer out of his hands after they
Yeah,
just won the conference finals. Like that's kind of ridiculous. He's a grown man. He's European, so they take their alcohol pretty seriously. And I just think like That's ridiculous. You're dealing with grown men. This isn't like an AAU basketball team where this guy doesn't play hard and he's out of shape. We're going to trade him. Like, you don't do that. This isn't, your high school disciplinary action. You don't just get rid of your best player because maybe he can't, finish a conditioning drill. And I do think that there's some turmoil. Obviously, there's some problems within the Dallas front office, whether that's Nico Harrison, whether that's ownership. I'm not sure what that is, but something's not right there. It'll be interesting to see how this whole Kyrie Anthony Davis dynamic works out. But I definitely think the Mavs front office and just the organization as a whole is kind of shooting themselves in the foot. Things have always seemed weird after Cuban sold part of the team, and
Yeah.
it just looks like it's going downhill from here.
And it's just one of those things where it doesn't make any sense, right? Because like in the NBA, it's this circulating thing of dynasties and things like that. And really a big thing in the NBA is if you're competitive every night, if you're a team year in and year out that's winning a lot of games, it's going to help your bottom line. And for them to go from Dirk to have a little bit of a plateau while Luka was still developing, and then to be back in this, like, we're going to win at least 42 games a year and be in the playoffs consistently, like, for them to sort of like get that and have like 10 more years we're going to be successful, and to give that up for maybe a better chance to win the championship this year, it's nonsense. It
It's
makes no
like
sense. I don't understand it.
breaking up with someone who is like you're in college and you're dating someone who's smoking hot. She's going to be a nurse. She's going to make a ton of money and she's just set for life. And then you like hook up with like the girl in the dorm next door and she's like cute
Because
for a
she's
year and
there.
then she kind of has a glow down and she always has a sprained ankle.
Wow, we're going after the ankle brace. That's crazy. All right, give us your number two. Give us your number two before we get
Number
more
two,
ankle
we're gonna
brace.
get back on board here. I got SGA. I'm a big OKC guy, as the hat, shows. Big OKC guy. But I think, it just brings back that nostalgia of the Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, Harden years. I think the league is in a better spot when Oklahoma City's better. I know we usually say that about big market teams, but I think in this case, Oklahoma City's kind of like the golden child of the NBA in a sense. And I think, similar to a lot of these guys, he's 26 years old and he's really savvy. We've seen his growth from his time when he was in the Clippers to now. It's night and day. His ability to just take care of the ball, to get his guys in position, and ultimately to score. I know, when you go on Twitter, you're always seeing Shea's a free throw merchant. Shea scored 30 tonight, 29 of his points were at the free throw line. Like, you can say what you want. They used to say that about James Harden, and he's one of the greatest scorers in NBA history. So I don't really care how you get it done as long as you're putting the ball in the net, that's really all that matters. And not only is he an elite scorer, he gets his teammates involved. We've seen guys like Jalen Williams become huge success stories, and I think a lot of that is because of Shea. I think as long as Chet can stay healthy, that this Thunder team is in a really good position. The only issue I have with SGA, and I don't really think it's much of an issue, is just can he win the big games? Last year
Yeah.
they were the favorites going into that Dallas series. They were young, they hadn't been there before and they ran into a team in Jason Kidd, coached by Jason Kidd, who had kind of been around the block once or twice. Luca had been in those moments before. Kyrie, we know, has championship experience, and so as this team gets older, I'd like to see him, become more of the man in those moments and just say the ball's going to be in my hands. I'm going to score here. Get out of the way. Like this is my time. So I'd like to see him take that next step. I think we'll see it, whether it's this year or next year. I hope it's soon, just for his sake, with how brutal the media is these days. But at this point, if you can go get yourself a guard who can score at essentially all three levels, can get to the free throw line, and is also, one of the best top assist leaders in the league, like why would you not want that?
Yeah, and I think with Shea too, like obviously you talked about playmaking, you talked about scoring. He's a dog on the defensive end. Like maybe not every night he's going to be the best defensive player on the floor, but like worlds better than a guy like Luca, like can really, really play on the defensive end, really plays well within that team system. Shea was my number one. I love SGA. I think the main thing that I've been so drawn to with him is that over the last 2 years, they've had, the best record in the NBA, or at least the best record in the Western Conference, and this year, the best record in the NBA. And I think the really interesting thing about that is he is the star of that team. Where you look at a Jason Tatum, he has a guy that you really like in a Jaylen Brown. But you look at a guy like Shea Gilgeous Alexander, Jalen Williams is a really nice player, but I don't think anybody's like, man, Jalen Williams is the best two in the league. And so I think looking at a guy like Shea, who really operates so well at all times, has a really good control of the game. I like that you brought up Harden. The way that Harden got free throws near the end was kind of gross. Wasn't very fun to watch. I think the way that Shea gets free throws is fun to watch because a lot of times it's him taking legit contact. Like it's him going at the hoop, manipulating big guys. It's not this like he gets somebody on his back pocket and then he's just like waiting for somebody to bump into him. He's really good at manipulating the big men kind of in that paint area. And I mean, at the end of the day, get to the free throw line, get your points, play good defense, that's going to help you win a championship. But I agree. I think me putting Shea at one is this belief that he's going to make this leap this year to at least be a Western Conference final kind of player, which I think he can be. But I think if he doesn't, I think it deserves a warranting of looking back at this list and being like, should Shea be that high if he can't take his team to that point?
No, for sure. Before we hop off the Thunder here, I have a little theory that I've been cooking up for the last couple of weeks, especially after the trade deadline. The Thunder have a ton of draft capital, as we know. They have some really good young pieces, but I'm not sure that they're guys that you want to have
I know
around
what
for
you're
a
doing.
super long time. Hear me out here. The Thunder, and we also know that Kevin
Don't do
Durant
it.
is down in
Don't
Phoenix.
do it.
KD's down in Phoenix. He's not happy. He's not loving
Okay.
life. He
Yeah.
wants to go out as being remembered as a great scorer. He loves basketball, but he wants to kind of rekindle that old flame with Oklahoma City. What if, and Chet needs a mentor too. Chet can't stay healthy. He's got some developing to do. What if we see KD come back, not for a huge haul, but for a couple of young guys, couple first round picks to Phoenix, kind of help them build their future. And KD comes in, all he has to do is score. He gets to rekindle that relationship with the Oklahoma City fans. He's got Shea leading the team. All he has to do is just shoot those mid ranges, shoot those pull up transition threes. He can help Chet grow into a two-way scorer. And next thing you know, we're looking at an OKC team that's got KD back in town. You got Chet in there, and obviously you have your franchise guy in Shea. I know it's crazy, but is it crazy enough that it could maybe happen?
I love it. See, there's a thing circulating around the internet right now that if the Wizards get the first pick, they take all the Thunder picks and give them Cooper
Mm.
Flag. I hate that. I hate it. I love Cooper Flag. Like if he, like I can't state to you like how upset I'm gonna be if we, like I'm doing a lot of hand stuff because I'm really, it gets me fired up. I want him so badly. No, let's go back to your theory though. I love that idea of getting Durant. You get this guy who can just be a pure scorer for your team. He's not, he's not a defensive liability yet, so he's going to play really well within that team, within that culture. I think then you can play Jay Will at the power forward. You can play Chet and Hartenstein. You can rotate them in at center, and then he gets some of those small forward minutes. And I think that really helps. They don't have a lot of guys that are really going to take up those minutes. I think you're probably taking a lot of Lou Dort minutes, and I love Lou Dort, great defensive player, but Lou Dort, KD, taking KD.
Yeah, I mean that, and I mean looking at that team defensively, I mean nothing's getting through the passing lane between the arms of Shea, KD, Jalen Williams, Stat, and Hartenstein. I mean that's first team all length right there.
Yeah, that's disgusting.
Yeah. Well,
I
I'll
love
get
it.
into my number one.
I love it.
I thought it was good.
Trading machine.
I was cooking it up last week. I was like, oh, that'll be interesting. But yeah, I'll get into
If the
my
Thunder, I was gonna say if the Thunder weren't so competent, they should hire you as their GM. Probably
exactly.
the Suns should. You should tie up their owner. You should tell him you don't get to do
Hold
anything,
them hostage.
and I'm gonna fix this team and give Devin Booker, any respect for being loyal.
Exactly. Yeah, no doubt. Well, I'll reveal my number one. I don't think it's going to be a shock to anyone, but I do have Victor Wembanyama at the top of my list. I know the blood clot thing, it comes at a really bad time considering it happened like last week and now we're filming this. But as long as that works out, I really hope it does. I think it's just really hard to not go with a 7-3 monster who shoots 36% from three. He can get it done in the interior, he can get it done from the outside. He can just do it all. And obviously, when you're 7'3" and you move like he does, that's what you're getting, and you know that's what you're getting. But at the same time, I just think that, he's 21 years old. He just turned 21. So he's just getting familiar with the nightlife in San Antonio, if you want to call it that. But I mean, the guy, he can protect the rim. I think his ceiling, or excuse me, his floor, as long as he stays healthy, is Tim Duncan, and that's a walking like 25 and 10. And I
Yeah.
think his ceiling is the greatest player of all time. I mean, like I said, he's shooting 35% from deep on 8 threes a game. That's no joke. There's guards in the NBA that aren't doing that right now. And at the same time, similar to what I said about Luca, he has a chance to be the face of the NBA as an international guy. And there's this whole like, I don't know if it's American media bias or whatever, but oh, an international guy can't be the face of the league. Why would that not be possible? When you look at the top 10 players, you could argue over 50% of them are international. I know Shea's from Canada. That kind of doesn't really count in my opinion, but whatever. The one thing I do want
Canada taking shots.
The one thing I would, I mean, hey man, after that hockey, it got me fired up. But the one thing I'd like to see Wemby make an adjustment about is looking at his stat lines yesterday. And I don't want to be, a huge box score nerd or whatever, but he's averaging 8 threes a game, but he's also averaging 10 twos. And I'd like to see that kind of balance itself out a little bit. I mean, you're 7-3, there's really no reason you shouldn't be down at the block unless you can shoot it, which he can. But at the same time, maybe if he cuts that down to 6 threes a game, 6 to 8 threes, and he's shooting 12 to 14 shots inside the arc, I think that makes him just way more dominant on the offensive end. And then also, on the defensive end, anyone's going to have a hard time shooting over a guy that's 7-3. I also am interested to see how San Antonio tries to hold on to him. I think small market teams are at a huge disadvantage in the NBA just based on how the money kind of moves about. I hope they keep him just for the sake of, the tradition of San Antonio having really good bigs, whether it's David Robinson, Tim Duncan, obviously now Wemby's in town. But I just think it's really hard to go against a guy that can literally do everything on the court. I think he could even be, a starting point guard on some low level NBA teams, as crazy as that sounds. And I mean, I just hope he stays healthy for his sake and also, for the sake of the league, because he has the potential to be the best player of all time, in my opinion.
And I mean, I think somebody would someone would have to be crazy to say that that take is a bad one, right? Because you're betting on a freak of nature. You're betting on somebody that we've never seen before, and you're also betting on somebody who we've seen already do it in the NBA, right? So the big question is, can you stay healthy? Can you sustain this level of play in his life? He's been a pretty healthy basketball player, which I think is great, right? And then you're looking at a guy who is uber competitive, who's always been competitive, whether it's in Olympic play, international play, or even in the NBA. I mean, I think you watch him on a night to night basis, a guy that plays that hard on defense cares about winning basketball games. And I think the best thing is that he's in a really stable environment with the Spurs, right? It's not going to be this long term rebuild where it's going to be, you're going to take, some bumps and some bruises along the way. I mean, they're already making good moves to get a guy like De'Aaron Fox. Obviously, Stephon Castle has been really good. I thought signing Chris Paul was just like a stroke of genius because what you're saying is we're dedicated to your development as a basketball player. And so I think, like you said, as long as Wemby's healthy, he's face of the league, greatest player of all time, like winning championships consistently, great. And I mean, he's probably already the second best center in the NBA.
How much do you think the Pop situation comes into this? Obviously, he's got the health issues. He's not going to be around for much longer in terms of coaching. And so, how much like effort or how much influence do you think Wemby has in who the Spurs bring in? Do you think it's like a LeBron situation where Wemby's like, this is who I want as my head coach, this is who we're hiring? Do you think it's more of a joint effort? Is like, okay, Wemby prefers this guy, but we like this dude. Let's try and find something in the middle, or do you think they almost entirely block him out from that process?
I think you have to include him in that process. I think in this era of the way that we love and care for NBA players. Not that I don't think Victor Wembanyama needs to be coddled. I think it's good to at least get somebody's input. I think if you're getting his input, you have to at least know that you're seriously considering his guy. Because if you don't, then that becomes like a whole other whatever bag of cats.
Yeah.
But I think the big thing with the Spurs is the Spurs have always done a good job of having really good coaching staffs. I know people don't like what Brent Brown did in Philadelphia, but he's probably the most successful Philadelphia coach over these last 15 years. I mean, we're clearly seeing that it was Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid, not his coaching. And so looking at guys like that, I mean, it would be interesting to consider Becky Hammon, proven coach with that summer league team. Obviously
Like
has been
that.
cooking with the Aces, and I mean she's been in San Antonio. I don't know if she would leave the WNBA. I'm sure the Spurs could give her a bag that would be comparable or more. But I think you have to take obviously his coaching input, but I think you just have to make the best decision for him, and that might not be his input.